Hi, folks, and welcome to the 8th episode of the Vitor Vicente podcast. Today, I'm chatting to Nuno Josué, a Portuguese translator based in the States for a good decades, between Los Angeles and New York. Nuno will also take us through his Jewish journey. So stay with us to hear his life path and lessons along the way. And I hope you will enjoy this episode and express your satisfaction with a thumbs up. It would be awesome if you could also subscribe to my channel. And I see you in a sec. Hi, Nuno. Welcome to my podcast.
Hi, Victor. Thank you for having me. It's a big pleasure always to talk to you. Absolutely.
Cool. It's mutual. I was very much looking forward to have you on the other side. I would prefer to have this in person, but there is an ocean between us. But thank God we have technology, so we can make these things happen. And talking of the times we spent together, we were just chatting before we get on camera that the last occasion we met was in New York. I think it was around 12 years ago. And one thing I keep from that conversation was your American accent. It was just perfect. You sounded like a native, so I wanted to verify if it's still the same. I bet it's still the case, but we'll find out as we talk.
Well, I've been living in the States for almost 30 years, so sounding American, I think it comes with the territory.
Yeah, 100%. I can see you didn't change at all. You are still the same American flow of us. And is it just the accent, or are you very much embedded in American culture?
That's a very good question. It's impossible, I would think. It's impossible to live in a country for so long. It's been almost 3 decades, 29 years, 30 years since I left Portugal. But it's impossible to live in a country for so long without some of it rubbing on you. Definitely. I was without going to Portugal for quite a while. And I remember the first time I went back, I had a few cultural shocks because I was so used to America already. I'm going to give you an example. Americans are very sensitive towards the other person. They don't want to make you uncomfortable. They'll never say, they'll never comment about the way you look or anything like that. It's considered a bit unpolite. In Portugal, not at all. People look at you, man, you're fat, you're skinny. There's no problem whatsoever. And those things kind of took me aback a
bit. Yeah, and that's absolutely true. I think it's very like this in the US, but overall in the English-speaking world, I think the language also favors that. It's a language that is not as direct as it is the Portuguese, Spanish, or some other continental European language, and of course it helps build the character. So that's very much the case here in Ireland too. So you were for a long time staying away from Portugal. So how many years did it take until you put your foot in your home country?
Let me see. I think I left Portugal in 2004. I lived in London for a year, and then I moved to Los Angeles in 2005, in the end of 2005. I mean, 1995, sorry. I moved away from Portugal. I moved abroad in 1994. And in 95, I moved to LA. And I think, probably 2000. So it was quite a bit, a few years.
Yeah. That's very unusual because the Portuguese have this thing of missing home and they cannot sit at the table without their food. So You are one of a kind. That's a compliment, man.
I'm a one.
You are, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I used to joke with my friends that I was kicked out of Portugal because
Is that a
because I
joke or there is something you want to
no,
share with you that people don't know? Huh?
it's a joke because listen, I don't eat pork. I never ate pork. I don't like wine really. I'm not a big fan of olive oil. Um, I don't like fish. Um, and now I'm a vegan, so I don't eat that period. But even before that, I never ate it. So uh, yeah, that stripped me away from my Portugueseness
Yeah,
almost.
yes, very, very much. I think both of us can compete for the person who left the Portugueseness on the side and move on with their lives. We'll see at the end of this conversation who is ahead on the game. I don't mind if you win. I don't mind. I don't mind. I've been
Listen,
heard so much from other people. So
I love pastéis de nata. I can eat a dozen in one sitting. So
and it's
that's,
interesting how they are so popular these days. I don't know if
yeah,
that's the case in the States, but here in Ireland, in the UK, they became like fast food. Like you can get a nata as you can get a slice of pizza. Like it's crazy if you think back 20, 30 years ago. They became like everyone's food.
yeah, absolutely. It's beginning to be like that here in the States, especially in the big cities. New York has a lot of you can find it in the supermarkets.
Mm,
There's quite a bit of there's a few Portuguese bakeries here. Teixeira's is a big one, and they make them. So and they have this
mm.
distribution network through supermarkets, and they sell them in the supermarkets. And gastronomic diplomacy. That's something it's funny. I was reading something about it yesterday, and it was really really funny. And I thought about natas, and it's funny that you talk
Mm,
about about Thailand.
mm,
Apparently, somewhere in the 80s, 90s, the government in Thailand decided to train chefs and send them throughout the world to open Thai restaurants. And around this time, they named pad Thai the national dish of Thailand. And now anywhere in the world where you go, there's a Thai restaurant, and people love Thai food. So they invested a lot in Thai diplomacy, in the gastronomic diplomacy, and it paid off. People now know where Thailand is, know about Thailand, and know about their food. And with Portugal, it was always the opposite. No one knew about Portuguese cuisine, and
yeah,
even in the States, the Portuguese restaurants remained close within the community. Um, and it was very rare for anybody outside the community to go to a Portuguese restaurant. So the natas it's great because it broke through that glass ceiling. um, yeah, it's great.
yeah.
I love
I would say the Nat is almost as known as Cristiano Ronaldo. So this Ronaldo is number one, Nata is number two.
it. Both good.
Both good. Yeah. You referred since we started talking, it's not even 10 minutes, 2 or 3 times LA, and that's another thing that I kept from our conversation in New York. That
Mhm.
you were kind of longing for LA. Is it still the case, or did that change since we met?
I have this theory. It's a theory that is reinforced by literature, but and poetry. We tend to be nostalgic about places where we were happy, right?
Hmm.
And I spent my 20s in Los Angeles. I moved to LA in my early 20s, early mid 20s, and it there was a lot of stuff happening. Um, LA is a very interesting town with a wonderful weather. It's when it dips below 20 degrees, people start complaining about how cold it is. Um, And yeah, I was very happy in LA. In LA also, I fully embraced my Jewishness. Was
Mm.
the first.
Can you expand a bit on that? That's something I'll be very keen to understand. So,
Yeah, absolutely. So I come from what it's called an Anusim family, a crypto Jewish family.
mm,
Um, my ancestors were forcibly converted in Portugal. Um, we managed to document at least 3 cases of people from my family were burned at the stake for the crime of being Jews. Um, yeah, two in Évora and one in Lisbon. So my family went on the ground, and it's really interesting because we had this history of doctors and professors and uh, geographers in the family, and then all of a sudden that goes away, and everybody becomes a carpenter, a stonemason.
mm,
So the professions that were very connected to the Jewish tradition, people were scared to maintain them within the family because of the Inquisition. So yeah, without going too far back, I think I went there already. But so in my grandfather somehow decided to step back a little bit from hiding, and I had a very very good relationship with my grandfather since I was a kid. He would give me tons of books. He would read to me. We would go on walks, and he would like show me off to to his
mm,
friends. My grandkid, he can talk about the dinosaurs and the creation of the universe. And me, like 5-year-old me, would like talk and talk and talk these poor old man's ears off
mm,
uh, with craziness. But yeah, so my grandfather, he would talk a lot about that. He would say, we're Jewish, and he talked about Jewish history and what it meant, and the, he had a prayer. He would say upon entering a church. It was very interesting. Um, he would say something like, I'm paraphrasing it in English. He would say, um, I enter here, but I do not adore sticks or stones. My God is Adonai,
mm,
God of Israel. Um, the sticks, it was the crucifix, and the stones were
yeah.
the saints, all that. So that was a common thing throughout the Anusim, the forcibly converted. Um, it was a tradition, one of the few traditions that remained. People knew about their identity, but they knew very little about Judaism because,
Mm,
all the books had been burned, all the traditions had been, gone for centuries. Um, yeah, but he told me a lot about it. And in LA, once I was, it's a funny story. I was listening to radio, to National Public Radio while working. I was a journalist at the time. I was a foreign correspondent for Visão and for the Economic. And I was listening to the radio, and there was this rabbi who was just being interviewed. He was talking about Jewish mysticism and Kabbalah and this and that. And I stopped, and it kind of resonated within my soul.
yeah.
I felt, man, this is deep. This is who I am. And the next day I went to the synagogue where this rabbi was the main rabbi, and I started learning with him. I started learning, and this was probably 97, 98. Yeah, and from that moment on, I decided that no more hiding. This is it.
Mhm.
I wear my
Yeah.
kippah every single day. Every single day.
Mm.
I don't get out of the house without it. Which in itself, now brings another
Yeah, that's what I
powerful.
want to say. How is it to be Jewish and American these days? I think it was always turbulent, but given the current situation or the escalation in Gaza, how is it for you and for the
Listen,
community?
when I lived in LA, when I began to study and I basically came back to the tradition, it was very welcoming because I lived in a mostly Jewish neighborhood in West Hollywood. I could walk to the synagogue. Let me give you an example. On Yom Kippur, I'm about to leave to the synagogue, and in Yom Kippur, you're not supposed to work. You're not supposed to drive a car. You're not supposed to, do any of that. And I realized that my car was parked on the wrong side of the street. There was going to be street cleaning that day. And the cop was like ticketing everybody on the other side of the street. And I went to him and told him, listen, it's Yom Kippur. I cannot drive. I cannot move my car. He looks at me, takes an empty envelope, puts it on my windshield, and says, you're okay. Don't worry.
Good man.
And that made me feel really good. I felt, man, this is a good place to live. This is a good place to be a Jew.
Can you imagine that happening these days?
No, I could not. As a counterpoint for this, I live in West Orange, which is a very, middle-class suburb from New York. In New Jersey, so it's a very left-leaning state. Local government is dominated by the Democratic Party. We had a town meeting a few weeks ago to discuss a motion that had been brought up to City Council to adopt the definition of anti-Semitism, a definition that it's been adopted universally by governments, and it's because we have a big Jewish community. The Jewish community is about 20% of the town, so it's a sizable community.
Yeah.
And there is an open public comment period before the vote. And I was watching it on Zoom and I had to turn it off because it was so...
Was that bad?
Yes. It was really violent, really disturbing.
Really? So people were putting their faces in front of their anti-Semitic comments, because I'm used to that, in the likes of Twitter, social media in general, which these freaking bots just talking. Let's call things by words, talking shit on Jews, but it's mostly hiding behind bots. So people were putting their names and faces behind that comments, and they didn't care. For me, that tells a lot that they are not really facing any consequences.
Absolutely. It became acceptable. Anti-Semitism is the less acceptable form of discrimination in the Western world right now, and specifically in the United States. And this has a genesis that goes way before whatever is happening in Gaza. It started with Trump. It started with Trump empowering the right-wing nut jobs, the neo-Nazis, there's good people on both sides discourse he had about people who were actually marching with Nazi flags in Charlottesville. He said there's good people on both sides. There was a demonstration that wanted to tear down a statue of General Lee, and there were actual Nazis demonstrating with Nazi flags. And he has this comment. There's good people on both sides.
Well,
David Duke endorsed Donald Trump. You read the KKK newspapers; they praise him. So he kind of created this climate where it's absolutely acceptable to be anti-Semitic openly. You can say everything you want about the Jews. That's it. It's accepted.
but how did that go from the right to the far left? That's what I'm very curious to know.
Absolutely.
Because you would think that the far left will say everything that Trump is against. They'll be on the other side. So,
no. And it's very telling that right now the Democratic Socialists of America and the David Duke website, you can just change the headline, and you can change the header of the site, and you look below, and you can't distinguish one from the other. You cannot tell them apart.
It's insane. Yeah. It's absolutely insane. Yeah.
Yeah, and in my case, it's even more hurtful and more disturbing because that's where I come from politically. I'm a Trotskyist. I'm I'm a lefty. All my life, my grandfather was a communist. That's how I was raised. I was raised singing the International, and before before April, before the revolution.
Yes.
I would sing the International on the bus, and my mom would be so upset that my grandfather taught me that because we lived in a dictatorship. Okay, so all this to tell you that coming from that part, I feel completely betrayed, absolutely betrayed, because the people I considered my equals in terms of struggle, people who shared my ideals, are now the people stabbing me in the back.
It's absolutely crazy. I was thinking to go to the States this year, but now I'm hesitating. I don't know where is my crowd anymore. It's good that I didn't book the ticket.
It's really scary, and I have a kid. I have a little kid. I have a 6-year-old girl, and my wife and I we are really worried about the future for her. Luckily, we're lucky enough to have enough money to have her in a private school. She goes to a Jewish private school. So she's shielded from all of this, because even we bought the house where we bought it because the public schools were so good. That was the main decision. We're going to buy this house because the public schools are great. Our kid is going to have a tremendous future. And the public schools are thriving with anti-Semitism. There's pamphlets, anti-Semitic pamphlets being distributed outside the high school here in town, in a left-wing town in New Jersey, 20 minutes from New York, with conspiracy theories that before were right-wing crazy nut job.
And now they're endorsed by the left.
Marjorie Taylor Greene level of crazy. The Jewish space lasers are causing the California wildfires. That kind of crazy level. And this lady is a member of Congress, right?
Yeah. That seems to me very similar to what would happen, say, in England, where the likes of, say, Andrew Tate would sit on the same boat as Jeremy Corbyn. Does that make sense? If you compare to the situation in the US, no?
Yeah, and Galloway just got elected, right? Galloway, which is one of the most anti-Semitic people alive, who has, was photographed and considers Hamas, their brothers. Was elected to Parliament.
It's unbelievable. Yeah. So where do you go? What's your crowd? Because you cannot be just in a bubble, with yourself, your family. You might have a few friends, but you need to be out and about, because we are all human beings and we need some exposure. So
Absolutely.
what's the place to go for you?
So what happens right now, it's more or less what happened to the Jews in the 1930s. We turn inward. That's what happens. Um, we basically fulfilled the accusation of insularity that anti-Semites
Yeah,
put on us, right? Because we feel so threatened outside of our circle, we go inward. So, my circle of friends are all Jews, are people
yeah,
from my synagogue, I have friends at work, absolutely, of course. But these are things I do not talk with them about for the most part. Actually, there's one person, my director, uh,
mm,
is actually somebody who came to me and asked me how I was, after October
yeah,
7th and all that, and asked me about if I had family in Israel and how they were. Um, so with him, we have like a 101 every 2 weeks, and and the last few times they have been mostly, me pouring my soul to him about all this mess we're in.
yeah.
Yeah.
And another scary thing that just came to my mind, if we expand the scope of this conversation, is that we all know that the US has a massive impact in the world. Like it or not, the US is taking the lead. Or the trends that happen in the States will sooner or later impact the rest of the world. Even if we just want to be different from the US, there will be repercussions. So if that's a situation in the US, we all are going to suffer the consequences, and we can see them.
We
Probably
can, yeah,
not to that extent, but
you can see,
they are happening.
you can see it all over the world currently. You can see it in Germany. I just saw a few days ago um, a wall on a subway in Dortmund where a swastika was painted, and with reference to the
Yeah,
Jews, and this is Germany, and Germany did a lot of work. Um, a lot of an amazing work to recover from uh, the Nazis.
yeah, I agree.
They introspected. They went down really really deep, and the kids were brought up after in the 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s and so on. They learned, and they were taught about all the atrocities and how to avoid this from happening in the future.
But I
Um,
think the Germans are also exposed to social media, like everyone else
yeah,
across the globe.
exactly.
And as
That's
much as the German education is there, they are going to be, you know, uh, influenced by what they see on the
yeah.
likes of internet, social media, and all that. So I wouldn't blame much the German government. I think it's just we are
No, no,
all
no.
under the same umbrella, and that will
You know,
happen, whether like it or not. Yeah.
I've been thinking quite a bit about this, in terms of the role of social media and the
Mm,
role of like the really shocking images that we see from Gaza, which is, it's absolutely dreadful what's happening, But war was always dreadful. War was always terrible, absolutely awful. Plato, Plato said that the only men who saw the end of war are the men who die.
yeah.
And yeah, talking about all the horrors, right? So this is my conjecture. It's impossible to prove, but I believe that if social media existed the way it exists today, if it existed in 1930s and 40s, the Nazis would not been wiped out. There would be an effort in the West, the same effort we see uh, the pro-Palestinian effort, pro-Hamas sometimes effort, would happen towards the Germans because a lot of innocent people died in the bombardments of the Allied bombings of Dresden and Berlin. Are today they would be considered war crimes.
Yeah.
Millions of people were killed. Millions of children were killed. If there was live feeds, if there was social media showing those horrors, people in the West would be pressuring for a ceasefire the same way they're pressuring now, even if that ceasefire would only benefit the Nazis, the same way that only the ceasefire will only benefit Hamas currently. No one wants this war. This is the cruxes of this issue, right?
Yes, starting with the Israelis that are on the field and are seeing their sons and daughters being sent to Gaza for a heavy fighting. They don't want that. That's not their interest. They just have to, because otherwise the terrorists can knock their door. It's not that they knock their door. They can just burn their houses with everyone there when they are sleeping, and there's nothing they can do.
So I've been reading a lot about how can the Jews who went through the Holocaust, who suffered so much, how can they be doing this? That's not the question that should be asked. The answer to that question is because the Jews went through the Holocaust. This is happening because they don't want it to happen again. Hamas is a genocidal entity, and they don't hide it, from the
They
river.
tell it, that's what I want to say. They tell it up front. If there's one merit about Hamas, is that they are transparent. That's the only thing I would give them. They are what they are. They don't hide it. Like you need to be a fool not to know it. Were you in the US during the 9/11? You were, because you were there for 30 years, if I go back. Were you? So the question is, were you in New York or were you in LA?
I was in Los Angeles. I was working. I had been working through the night, writing a story, like a stupid story about a movie that had just come out, and I went to bed at like 4 o'clock in the morning, and at 8, I think, my ex-girlfriend calls me and tells me, turn on the TV. And it was absolutely shocking and impossible to forget.
Were people afraid of losing their own lives, or it was just only about New York and the surrounding states?
No, it was something. 9/11 was something that reverberated through the entire fabric of American society, because it threw away that sense of vulnerability that existed in America. America had fought 2 world wars, and was never, with the exception of Pearl Harbor, continental America had never suffered an attack. So there was this sense of, okay, there's a huge ocean here between us and them, and we're good, we're safe. And 9/11 tore that down completely. People, even in small towns, they felt threatened, they felt scared. I remember when the Super Bowl, a few months later, the Super Bowl was about to happen, and everybody was talking about an attack on the Super Bowl. Americans have this sense that Super Bowl is the biggest thing in the world. No one outside the United States,
and it's not.
no one outside the United States know what the hell a Super Bowl is. But but this just to tell you that people were scared, people were afraid, and that's when Rudy Giuliani, the mayor of New York at the time, was not the most popular of people. Even then, he becomes America's mayor, because he manages to unite people. He managed to console people. He manages to start healing. And he tumbled down since then, and today is a non-factor in American politics. But yeah, it did cause.
You think there is a before and after in the history of the US?
It's hard to say. At the time, definitely. I remember writing. I wrote for Grand Reportage at the time. I talked to architects that would tell me never again would any architect in the United States build a skyscraper ever. Not true. People, we always tend to underestimate the ability of people to forget things really fast.
Yes.
And that happens over and over and over again in history. Somebody said, I can't remember exactly who, Aldous Huxley maybe, he said that history doesn't repeat itself, but often rhymes. And that's very true.
Yeah. Well, we met, which I think was 12 or 14 years ago. I can't remember. I'm getting old. You mentioned that you haven't been to Israel physically.
Yeah.
But you were there every single day of your life in a spiritual manner. And I presume it's still the same. You still travel to Israel through prayers and other forms of religious acts. But have you been to Israel yourself or no?
I'm married to an Israeli American. But no, I haven't been to Israel myself
at all.
Not
really?
yet. Yes. Listen, I haven't been outside of the United States except to go to Portugal for a long time. And because of work, because of since my kid was born, we haven't been anywhere. But in this year, next year, we're hoping to take my kid. And my dad is 89. He hasn't met my kid yet in person. Sees her, over WhatsApp on the video, but he hasn't seen her in person. We want to take her to Portugal, and we want to take her to Israel to see our family there, and to see where we come from.
Yeah, that's what I want to say. Even for the kids, it's I think it's a remarkable milestone. Like you are, let's say, studying in a Jewish school, and I presume that they'll be craving for that visit. It will be like part of their growth. Like this has to happen at some point. It cannot be something there on the map that they see at the class. It needs to be seen with their own eyes. So I hope you can make it happen soon.
Yeah. So she's bilingual. She's in the school. The school is absolutely amazing. They have 2 teachers for the class. One only speaks Hebrew to them, and one in English, and they learn every single subject in both languages, which is amazing. My wife is she's completely bilingual as well. She was born in Boston when her parents were at Harvard, and she was raised in Israel, and came back to the States as a teenager, and then went back to the army and to university, and then came back to the States. So there's a lot of back and forth. So Israel is our ancestral homeland, and it will always be. Even the Jews in Portugal, who, as far as we can trace, my family has been living in Portugal.
Mm.
But my DNA test shows that I'm like majority, like 70% Sephardic Jewish, and I even have 1% Druze DNA.
Druze. Wow,
Yeah,
you're the first person I'm
yeah,
meeting with Druze
yeah.
genes.
It was a really interesting insight into
Yeah.
my genetic history.
I
That
can
and
put my podcast now that I have a Druze as a guest.
uh,
I can
all,
claim that for yeah.
another revelation was a few percent, 2.5 of sub-Saharan African,
Mm.
which most of the Portuguese population has, because
Yeah.
even David Duke, in his book about how freaking racist one can be, he he equates the decline of the Portuguese Empire to the absorption of the slave population within the general population. So slavery is abolished uh, in the 1700s in Portugal, late 1700s, early 18.
Mm.
Was the first country in the world to abolish them. But we're also one of the first countries in the world to industrialize slavery. We
Yes.
cannot forget that. But so, and David Duke, the great wizard of the KKK, he cites Portugal as an example because within 2 generations, there were no more pure black people in Portugal.
Mm.
They had been absorbed. There was intermarriage within the population, and they had been absorbed. And
Yeah.
he cites that as an example of decline of.
I think that
We know that.
people who are very much obsessed with race, and that is valid on both far right and far left. They
Yeah,
have like serious issues because that's just the way it is. Especially these days, everyone is everywhere. There's no such thing as a pure Portuguese or a pure American
yeah,
or a pure Israeli. We are all mixed. We are, these claims that the whites are responsible for that and the blacks brought the plague. Like it doesn't make sense at this point. We are too much mixed. Whether you like it or not, just accept it. Like you did this DNA test, and there is so much in your blood that you cannot just say I'm Portuguese or I'm sub-Saharan African. You are a puzzle, and
yeah.
that's the way it is. Especially when I see in Brazil. Like Brazil is a
Italian,
good example of that. Oh, Italian in Brazil, you see a lot of those people like claiming for, I come from a black a black family. I've been oppressed the whole life. But just look at my face. It's not that mathematic. And then you have the others who claim that I'm purely Italian or purely Dutch. And then you look at their lips. Their lips are African, and that's just the way it is, and that's okay. Just
it's not okay. It's fantastic. It's
yeah, yeah.
great. Um, it, Going back to my DNA ancestry test. So I have Italian in my DNA. I have British and Scottish. Who knew? My family comes from this tiny, tiny village in Alentejo. Uh,
Mm,
it's impossible to know that village that was so theoretically isolated
mm,
from the world would have people with such mixed
yeah.
genetic ancestry.
When we were preparing this podcast, you mentioned that you lived in London.
Mhm.
I totally forgot about it, to be honest. I mean, we talked when we met in New York maybe for 3-5 hours. So, of course, I couldn't uh, remember every single thing we went through. And we were talking about this when I was watching Man City against Man United. And
Correct.
you also brought to the conversation that you are an Arsenal supporter. And I was shocked What happened to you? I thought you would be a Spurs supporter,
I
and
know,
you
but
even end up being with a rival, with Arsenal. Was it the
listen,
red shirt? And why not Liverpool or United, but freaking Arsenal?
you know, football and politics are, this is proven scientifically that
Mm,
first there's an emotional connection, then there's a rationalization of that emotion, right?
mm.
Um, that it's like that in politics and it's like that in football. Although in football, usually it's a family tradition. My dad and my grandfather took me to Benfica games, so I grew up as a Benfica supporter. But in
So you have
London,
seen it. Yeah.
yeah, somehow I felt attracted to Arsenal. And I lived in Chelsea. I lived by King's Road, fairly close to Chelsea. Well, within Chelsea, but fairly close to the grounds of Chelsea. I don't know. I can't explain why Arsenal, but I discovered many years after that you mentioned Spurs, because Spurs is usually the Jewish team in London, right?
Yes.
The Eads, that's their
Mhm.
nickname. I found out that one of my spiritual mentors, Rabbi Sacks, he was also an Arsenal supporter.
No
So
way.
I'm not the only
Rabbi
Jew.
Sacks was an Arsenal supporter.
He was the chief rabbi of Britain. So
Yeah, yeah,
I
I
didn't do
remember that man. Yeah, 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 yeah. Well, if he would be around now, I would hesitate to bring him to the podcast just because he's an Arsenal supporter. Even though he is one of the most wisest people I've ever heard. He was just fantastic and articulate. He was like the Aristotle of the 21st century.
absolutely. It was I would say probably the foremost Jewish public intellectual of the 20th
Mm, yeah.
century. Um, Maybe in terms of popularity, he would probably be at the same level as Bernard Lévy, but in terms of insight um,
Yeah.
and spirituality, yeah, he was the foremost for sure.
Yeah.
His last book is a book that I recommend to anyone. Morality. Um,
Mm.
and when we hear the word morality, we think about what we think about. We think about sex. We think about. Uh,
You think about sex. I didn't say a word, huh?
but Rabbi Sacks, he talks about the concept of morality. For him is how we deal with other people, how we treat other people,
Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right? How society takes care of their lesser, the people who have the least. That's the concept of morality he talks about. And that's a concept of morality that we lost.
Yeah,
It's gone.
100%. We, especially if we are coming from a Catholic country like ourselves, now we tend to link morality to repression, to a code of conduct that is quite
Yeah,
strict. It's like you can't do that, but and you cannot do that, and if you do that, you're gonna be punished. And that's what morality is, or it's part of what morality is. It's much more than that. Morality is, it's I think should be called or should be rebranded like ethics. How you deal with others, how you look after yourself, who you are, what's your role here. It's probably the most fundamental theme, in the whole scheme of things.
100%. And going back to one of the first subjects that we talked about, um, the left, my left, has lost their morality because they became absolutely unkind,
Yes.
um, in the name of kindness, in the name of defending minorities. They are unkind.
Yeah.
They're bullies, and it's
100%. Yeah. Yeah.
it's
So
really really
who would be the figure, let's say, in the mainstream, in the US mainstream, that you would resonate with? Maybe Bill Maher?
yeah. Bill Maher for sure. Although, yeah, there was a time where I didn't really connect with him, but yeah, lately for sure. Maher is a lefty. Is what in the States we call a liberal, which in Europe means something completely different.
Yes.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, he is a left winger, but he's a strong supporter of Israel.
Yes. And
He
he doesn't get dragged by group thinking. He is what he is.
yeah,
Sometimes he gets things wrong, and he has no problem in beating them later on. I think he thinks by himself.
yeah.
He is not just making favors, just to be accepted and to get that medal. So
But
people have to give them that. I know you might disagree with him. A couple of things, maybe COVID, I would say, but other than that, I think you are with him. Like he's honest and transparent.
But let me ask you something, Victor.
Hmm.
Isn't it telling that um, kind of the barometer of common sense right now in the left in the United States is a comedian?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, that's a good catch. Yeah,
Yeah, we have to go to comedians to find the common sense.
yeah.
It left politics.
And what is more outrageous is like comedy or sense of humor is it's mostly gone from the left side of this of the spectrum. Like they are humorless, and unfortunately, that I also come from a left wing family. Yeah, I don't have exact same views as you in certain things, but I know exactly what you mean. But like they are just bitter, resentful, angry. It's very hard to have a conversation, that it's not in their terms. And one thing I'll be very interested is how do you see yourself in 2024 with the upcoming election? Because you will probably be with Democrats, but when it comes to Israel, you are like a hardcore Republican.
No,
So and
no,
these
no,
days being pro,
not even
no,
close. Not even close. Listen, there's many. The thing with American politics, with American political parties, is that they're very thin, meaning they're more driven by uh, characters, by political figures, than by
mhm,
the party itself. There's no party structure per se, as we talk about it in European terms. What there is one leader or one set of people who kind of drive the movement of the party to one side or the other. So right now, this is a very good way to see this is Trump. Trump is like driving the Republicans, has been driving them for a few years now, and he's
mhm,
driving them to the abyss. They're tied to him because he has all this what it here is called coattails, this
yeah,
clout, his supporters, they're nuts for the most part. uh, and you have like ideological figures in the party like Mitch McConnell, who is a real conservative, too much of it for my taste,
mhm,
who was vilified by Trump. It was like he called him the worst names possible. His wife was the Secretary of Transportation under Trump. He called her the worst possible things you can imagine. And now
mhm,
McConnell comes out this week and says, I'm supporting Donald Trump. They have no spine.
mhm,
Uh, Ted Cruz from Texas, senator from Texas, Trump told in no uncertain terms that his wife was too ugly
yeah.
to have sex with anybody. Uh, Supports Trump. Is making calls for Trump.
Yeah, but
No,
overall, politics are quite dirty. whether it's the Republican Party in the US or the Labour in the UK. Like we all know that the degree of honesty and transparency it's very low. So I'm not surprised with that, but I know the same can be replicated in the Democratic Party in the US or in I don't know what Vladimir Putin party in Russia and so on and so forth. So,
but all of this to tell you that we cannot say the Democrats are this and the Republicans are that.
Okay.
The Democrats have more shades of gray than the Republicans right now. The Republicans have black and white. There's the Trumpers and there's the never Trumpers. And the Trumpers include the spineless ideologues who, even after being trounced by Trump, still support him.
Yeah.
And the never Trumpers.
What the groups are in the Democratic Party? Because I can only see, let's say, the classical Democrats, the likes of Hillary Clinton, Biden, who are prone to go to war. They are not as radical, but then they have the upcoming figures like AOC, Kamala Harris, and a few others.
Yeah,
and then you have RFK who had to leave and be independent. So, but where is the space in between?
Is also a nut, but that's a different side.
A Nazi.
Nut, completely crazy.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Okay. Nut. No, not a Nazi. He can be many things, but not that. So in the Democrats, you have more shades, right? You have, as you were talking about, you have the traditional liberal Democrats in the American sense, like Biden, Hillary, Chuck Schumer, the leader of the Democrats in Congress, and then you have the extreme left. See as an example, the Squad, the four congresswomen.
So how different is that from the Republicans? Because it seems on the Republicans is the Trump team and the non-Trump team, and on the Democrats it's the radical left and the moderate or classical left. So
you have more people in the center. You have like progressives that align in terms of economics and social views with AOC, but are pro-Israel, and they understand that this is a fight for life that Israel is facing, and like John Fetterman, the senator, for whom the Senate had to rethink the dress code because he refused to wear a suit and tie. Is a progressive. He's on the extreme left, but you would consider the extreme left, which I identify fairly well with John Fetterman in this case, because he once met the expansion of universal healthcare. United States is the only country in the Western world that does not have a national healthcare system, a universal healthcare system, where people, some people have no healthcare at all. So with those social concerns, he has those social concerns, but then in terms of foreign policy and in terms of worldview, is completely aligned with what you would call the hawks in the Democratic Party. So you have a few like this. You have a few people like this. You don't have that in the Republican Party. Either you are with Trump or you're against Trump. There's no midterm. There's no midpoint.
So we were going through a few prominent figures. So I think that's a good opportunity to move to our rapid fire questionnaire, because the first is for you to choose between two main figures, and the last one as well. But let's start with number one. So Barack Obama or Shimon Peres?
I like them both, honestly.
I knew it. I want to challenge you.
Yeah, you wanted to make it hard. I have to say Obama. he did a lot of work, but his work didn't really came to fruition, unfortunately, for all of us. Obama did change a lot in this country. It did change a lot, and it changed also the perception of the United States from abroad. Yeah, I have to say Obama. I do like Paris. I do like him. If you said Rabin, I had to say Rabin. But
Oh, I didn't nail it. I should have chosen Rabin. But I can amend the second question because you already gave me a hint. So the second question was meant to be beer or wine, but you already mentioned that you don't like wine.
Beer.
So I have to choose beer or whiskey.
Oh, that's a hard one. That's a really hard one. It depends on the day, but yeah. But you're in Dublin, right? So
I am, yeah.
yeah.
Also hard to choose here because both are top quality.
Yeah, but I have to say Guinness. I have to go with the beer in this case.
Good man. Savo Bello or Susan Sontag?
Bello, always. I translated Sontag's diaries for Quetzal. It was an interesting experience, an insight into her personality. Bello rings more, within my core for sure. I like his writing better than I like Sontag, although she was fantastic. Yeah, but I identify more with Bello for sure.
Cats or dogs?
That's a very hard one too. I have 3 cats and 1 dog. My dog is a Great Pyrenees. He weighs 95 pounds. He's a big boy. 95 kilos, I mean. 180.
95 kilos, yeah.
95 kilos.
He's heavier than me.
He's a big dog. He's huge. And I have 3 cats, and they get along really, really well.
You mean the cats and the dog?
The cats and the dog, yeah. The cats own the dog, basically.
They are a majority, so there's no option for the dog.
When we were looking for a dog, we really wanted to adopt a dog, and it had. So Lily, my kid, she was little. She was like 3 or 4 at the time. So it had to be a dog that would get along really well with little kids, and the dog would get along with cats. At the time, we had 1 cat, an 18-year-old cat, geriatric little guy, who in the meantime passed away. So it had to be a breed that would be good for both. And the Great Pyrenees is the best because they're guardian dogs. They're not shepherd dogs. They're guardian. So the shepherds leave them in the Pyrenees mountains with the flocks and go home. So they stay by themselves with the sheep, and they defend them from wolves and bears and whatever. And they're really good. They're really good with like small cuddly animals because they have to protect them. So yeah, my kid loves them, and the cats love them.
You still haven't answered my question, huh? I don't know if
it's
you
a
know
tie.
this, but yeah.
Yeah, I have to say a tie. It's awful, but I can't decide.
Is it that the cats and the dog are listening to the podcast and they are afraid?
Yeah, exactly. They're
the reaction. Huh? I would be very afraid of the dog if he's 95 kilos. I would just say dog, just not have a fight with him.
He is imposing. And the thing with Pyrenees, somebody defined Pyrenees, and this is the best definition I've heard of them. It's a cat. It's a dog with that looks like a polar bear. It does look like polar bear in size, and it is completely white. A dog with the mind of a cat, and the voice of Barry White. It looks like a bear, as the mind of a cat.
You see around, because I think I need him on the podcast to boost my views. If you have material like that,
I
nice.
think he's in the
So
backyard. I think he's in the
next time have him in your lap. Huh?
Yeah. I would love to. It is really sweet. He's a sweet boy. So old cats and dogs, yeah.
Tie. Okay, just one thing. I wouldn't allow a tie, but I will only allow one tie. Okay? Which means you need to answer the next 3 questions, and they are going to be tougher as we progress.
Oh my goodness!
So are you okay with the tie? Okay, you are. Los Angeles or New York?
Los Angeles, without a thought. Yeah, LA.
Los Angeles.
I'm gonna say something absolutely dreadful that people will be really pissed off at me, or for European English speakers, very crossed with me, very cross with me. So I don't really like New York. I think New York is very overrated. It's extremely crowded. It's smelly. I live in the suburbs, and I'm lucky to go to the office a couple of times a week. And my office is in Purchase, which is a few miles north of New York. And it's a beautiful campus. It's like a beautiful garden, has art on the wall. So it cleans up your soul to go to work, actually. So I haven't actually gone to Manhattan that much in the last since the pandemic. Actually, we go to New York to the museums. We go to New York. My brother-in-law is a musician, and whenever there's a concert, once in a while we go to his concerts. But yeah, I think to live in New York and really enjoy what New York has to offer, you have to be in your 20s and you have to be single, and that's it. After when you reach,
that was you when you lived in Los Angeles.
That was Los Angeles for me.
Exactly.
That was Los Angeles for me.
That might explain a lot. Yeah.
When I was in Los Angeles, there was also something else. Let me just tell you this. I had lots of time. Because I was working for Portuguese publications. I was working for Guerreiro Económico, Visão, and then Independent, Grande Reportagem. There was an 8-hour difference. So Guerreiro Económico usually closed its edition at like 9 o'clock. So it'd be like around 2 o'clock p.m. for me. So for most of the time when I didn't have to write for Visão or for any other publication, I would have all that time free after 2 o'clock. I would go surfing. I would go to the beach and I would go surfing. So that's a pretty sweet deal for a 20-year-old, right? I was lucky. I was very lucky.
Yeah. So you were talking about the sea, and you almost took the words out of my mouth. The next one is swimming in the sea, or swim in the sea, or walk in the nature.
I like both. I do love swimming, and I miss surfing quite a bit. We bought the house in a beautiful town, West Orange, which is where Thomas Edison had his laboratory, and where the light bulb was basically created. And we have like a natural preserve. Basically a reservation, a mountain reservation with waterfalls, and I can just walk my dog into the mountains and the forest and see animals. I walk my dog every day and I see deer, I see foxes crossing the road.
That's cool. Yeah.
There's turkeys, there's wild turkeys in town. So that's a hard one. I miss swimming, I miss surfing, but I really love walking in nature. I have to say.
And the answer is nature.
Yeah, walking in nature.
Yeah. Ties are not allowed. You already picked yours.
I got my exception already.
Yeah, your allowance is gone. Yeah. So last one, and again, there are no ties. So you need to pick one: Donald Trump or Alex Jones.
Oh my God.
I was looking for that one. I'm sorry, you already picked your tie. So
So yeah, so basically you're asking me if I want to be shot in the head or shot in the heart. Or oh my God. Okay, they're both extremely dangerous. Extremely dangerous. One, uh, if you want to know, um, if you want to know the genesis of Alex Jones, I recommend you reading a book by John Ronson about the conspiracy theories. He met him in the early 90s in Texas, when he was like still kind of a normal person. And then it started going downhill from there. But, Alex Jones is a proponent of conspiracy theories, and we all know where all conspiracy theories go to. They all drive to the Jews at some point. Any conspiracy theory, when it comes down to the bottom, blames the Jews for everything.
yeah, with
right?
that I agree. Yeah, yeah.
Of course. So that's extremely dangerous in that sense, because it makes people believe in absolutely ridiculous things like the government is putting this is actually something he said. The government is putting fluoride in the water, and that is turning the frogs gay in Wisconsin. Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah, exactly.
No.
That's exactly the correct expression to make upon hearing this.
That's wild. How
Yeah,
can you
but
make such a
that's the
statement?
level. That's the
And
level of Alex Jones. So, I think it's a myth. I read that this is a myth, that when you boil a frog, you slowly increase
yeah,
the heat, and the frog doesn't realize that.
I'm not going to try it, but yeah,
No,
yeah,
it's a myth. It's
yeah.
it's proven that it's wrong, because
Mm.
it gets to a point where it's so uncomfortable that the frog will jump off. But this is a very good example of how Alex Jones has prepped his audience. He started feeding them so many conspiracy theories that at this point he can say anything that they will believe in. Anything. Yeah, fluoride in the water makes the frogs gay in Wisconsin, for sure. People believe it because they've been prepared for years and years of crazy to reach this degree. Okay, so Alex Jones, nut and dangerous. Donald Trump. Donald Trump is much more dangerous. Donald Trump is a threat to American democracy at this point. He was the worst president in history, in any Western country. I would venture to say he was completely inept. He had no grasp on any issue.
You mean in the human history, like
Well, I would say
another likes of Adolf Hitler and all that. That's
in modern time. No, I'm saying inept.
okay.
Hitler was awful. He was despicable, but he wasn't an idiot. He knew what he was doing, right? I'm not comparing him to Hitler. I'm not doing that. It would be a mistake to compare him.
Yeah.
He was inept. Donald Trump was inept. He was way above. He was, everything was above his head. He had no clue what he was in for. He starts the race for the American presidency because of his reality show. Because in The Voice, Gwen Stefan was offered a contract that was higher than what he was being paid for The Apprentice. So he threatened NBC that he was going to run for president and was going to leave the show. And he hired actors to appear in rallies. The first rallies were like props, basically.
Yeah.
And he started to believe in his own lie. And he started to enjoy the rallies, and he started doing them for real. And at one point, the snowball was so big that he just said, "Let's go for this." But it all started as a joke, as a negotiating way, as a way to negotiate his contract renewal with NBC.
So which direction are you leaning, Alex Jones or Donald Trump?
I have to say Trump. Trump as the most dangerous, right?
Okay, so you would, let's say both are running for office, you would vote on Alex Jones if they're the last two options.
Yeah. If anybody still has any doubts about Trump, I recommend that you read Bob Woodruff's 2 books he wrote about Trump, the Trump presidency. And we're talking about Bob Woodward, the Watergate guy. The guy who wrote a book about every single president since Nixon. He has no agenda here. He interviewed thousands of people. He has thousands and thousands of hours of interviews, and everything is extremely well documented. And it's a frightening look behind the scenes of the Trump administration.
I'm just conscious of the time here.
Yeah,
and I'm just
having fun talking with you.
Yeah, it was the same when we met in person in New York. And my plan, I don't know if I told you this or not. I think I did, but it doesn't matter. If I didn't, then I will say it again. When we met, my plan was to spend like a couple of hours with you, and then go to a NBA match. But I didn't care. I was so satisfied with the conversation that I gave up on an NBA match. And I'm a big basketball fan.
Oh,
and it's not that I can go to an NBA game tomorrow because I'm in Ireland. So that
now I feel
I enjoy talking to you. Yeah,
I feel extremely guilty because now you didn't tell me that at the time, and we talked for hours and hours and hours, right? It was we sat in. It was raining like hell, right?
Yes.
And we found this cafe and we just we talked and talked. Yeah.
So next time we go to an NBA game, the two of us, that we can
it's
do both the game and it's on you exactly. Yeah,
and it's gonna be on
me
because I owe you. Listen, I'm an introvert. I'm basically like any writer. I like to be behind the scenes. I like to be in front of an empty page on an empty white screen, the computer. But for some reason, some people bring the extrovert in me, and you are one of those people, Victor.
I'm very pleased.
I really appreciate your friendship, and I really appreciate talking to you.
Yeah, likewise. Like it's always learning to talk to you. I think we have frank and direct conversations. We don't hold back. We agree with some points, we disagree with others, but we talk what we think, and that's how two adults should interact. So I hope there'll be more of that in the US and across the road. So yeah, it was very much enjoyable. So I think we can do this again in person and maybe another podcast. Yeah,
absolutely. I'm here. You know where to find me. I'm not going anywhere.
Good. Cool. Okay. Thanks for this and take care.
Thank you so much.
Take care. Bye.